Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to our Working Together series, Q&A live with Rabbi Karmi Ingber from Atlanta, Georgia. We are sitting in the Netiv Zoom room down in Texas, and we're just going to break in. We're still waiting for the rabbi. He's definitely coming because he texted me he was coming for sure. So let's just jump right in and see what's going on with Rod Bryant. And yeah, let's get some updates. Rod, how are you today?
Well, I'm doing fantastic. I first would like to ask those who are joining us outside of the actual Zoom room, type in on the comment section what town or city you're from, so that we can kind of know where we're reaching to. Right now, if you'll see on the screen, or if you'd get a like a, what do you call it, a gallery view, we have Ronald, who's in Australia, Stephen Block is in Stephen, you're in Tennessee, right? No, I can't hear him. William is, I know, from that area.
Columbus,
David,
Ohio.
Ohio, same thing, right?
Yeah,
No,
kind of. No, yeah. Michigan,
not really.
the same.
Yeah, David here is in Houston, one of our latest students and members, but a very astute student of Torah, been studying for many, many years. Tara and Nancy, originally from South Texas, and they've moved to Kansas to see if they can find Dorothy. I don't think that they found her yet. And of course, Sandy, my right-hand assistant and person that really helps Netiv. She kind of keeps me straight, so that helps a whole lot. And then Mary with Ori, that's sitting there, the little dog in her lap, cutest thing. Martha is in College Station. And let's see, Nancy, she's in my Hebrew class. We're really glad that she's here. She's our local cattle baroness. And Craig, remind me again, you're in Florida, correct? May not be on. Yeah, William is in Kentucky. So
yes, Florida. Yes.
Yeah, excellent. And Martha, I don't know what you're eating, but it looks pretty good. So did you bring enough for the rest of us?
So any new news down there in Texas? Just hot.
No, just very hot. I mean, obviously we have a relaxed learning schedule this summer with Sunday morning, Sunday evening. And then Wednesday night, Parsha study, Thursday morning, Parsha study. And we are talking to Rabbi Jeremy Gempel about doing a program when he comes to Houston. Either we will have it on Zoom, but we're also talking about having a meeting in a hotel or something. So anybody wants to drive in and kind of spend some time in fellowship that weekend or that weeknight, that would be a great time to do it. And I think Rabbi Ingber just joined us into the group. And first, I have to say this, Dan, I really appreciate the cooperation and relationship that you have with Netiv, and of course, Netiv with the World Noahide Center. And obviously, Rabbi Ingber representing the World Noahide Center, as well as himself, and working with the Noahides. And we really appreciate what Rabbi Ingber and the many rabbis do to help encourage us in the study of Torah. And so, Rabbi, we're going to turn it over to you whenever you're ready. Are you ready? You got your drink in hand and you're on mute, Rabbi. Oh, he's doing his bracha. So if we say amen, it's as we're getting to enhance that, right? We get to be a part of that.
Right. Now, folks, let me remind you, Rabbi Ingber is going to share probably a little intro chat to try to whet the appetites. And this is an open Q&A. So if you're out there on the Noahide World Center social media and you have a question for the rabbi, type it in the chat, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. I'm trying to monitor several channels all at once, and I will try and get that question to the rabbi because you're very important, and we want to make sure you get a straight Torah answer from a learned rabbi. And we're just so overjoyed to be joined by Rabbi Ingber. Rabbi, are you there?
I'm here, and video and audio ready to go.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, take it away, sir. So good to see you again, and I'm sorry I missed you last week. It just the way they connected, long night for me, and these things happen. I went to bed after my first broadcast from Jerusalem in the morning, and yeah, and was out like a light when you called.
No problem. No problem at all. So, hi everybody. I think what I want about today. Maybe we'll conclude. Maybe it might go on more than 1 week. But what I want to talk about is a very important question. And I want to give a little history to understand how did the world get this crazy and what can I do about it? That's the topic I want to discuss. How the world got so crazy may take more than one session, as it's pretty crazy. But I need to give a little history here. We've done this a little bit before because it's very important to understand the parameters, understand where we are, because every person lives in their own little bubble. It's a blip. A person lives 100 years, it's still a blip in history. It's nothing. So you have to get a broader view of God's grand plan and what's my role in that and where is the world going. And when I think about the philosophy of the world today, which I don't know if you all realize it because we all grew up at this from the time of Darwin, as Darwin's friend Aldous Huxley said, Darwin was the first one to give atheists some way to explain their beliefs. It justified a whole world that before was not discussed. Because before that, there was idolatry. They believed in different gods, but not to believe in some being that was the cause of this world was a foolish belief. So whether you like Darwinism or you subscribe to evolution, as we discussed, evolution means a lot of different things. And, we can discuss that as we go. But whatever it is, that's not a very long time. So people believed in a different world, which had its own problems and in certain ways worse. But we're all in the world of random. And that's frightening because you have to understand the modern person who does not believe in God, and we'll talk about the mistaken beliefs in God, believes the world is random. So you can do crazy things because everything is purposeless. I mean, I honestly don't know how a person who believes the world is random, how they get up in the morning. I don't understand it. And therefore, unfortunately, these terrible tragedies of people that are crazy walking in, shooting people, like for a normal, sane human being, you can't imagine that. I start thinking about what are they thinking? If the world out there believes that is nothing, no rhyme and reason, and the only reason why they act proper is because they have law that forces them to, or because they get their physical pleasures every day to go out. But most people don't get their dream of their pleasure, and so their life is clearly meaningless. And that's a very dangerous world. So I want to go back in history from the beginning, the process of the crazinesses that happened before and to the craziness of today, and ask ourselves, what could we do about this? How do we have to understand way the world improperly sees the world and what's the proper way? Okay, that's what I want to do. All right, so let's start. Back to this, I shared with you once before. We're going back to the beginning of creation. Okay, God created the world although there were many pairs of animals, right? There were male, females of all the different breeds to procreate. But intentionally, God created the world from one couple to understand the importance of a human being. That the entire world comes out from one unit, one couple. That means every individual is considered to be a world unto themselves. And that's the famous teaching that if you kill someone, you destroy an entire world. If you save a person, you save an entire world. Okay, that's a, just to understand, because we're going to talk about people's insanities. That idea, that Jewish idea, which again, when I say Jewish, I mean true ideas from the source. That is maybe in the world today, that's like acceptable. We can kind of certain maybe way people can. You have to understand how radical that is in the ancient world. Okay, like, you know, in America we talk about the Greeks, the great Greeks. The Greeks, wow, you know, they were the founders of the philosophy. If you lived in Athens and a child was born with any kind of deformity, what'd they do? They killed the child. That's what they did. That was advanced Athenian belief. We're not going to keep these burdens on society. They don't match up to the beauty of what the physical form that we Greeks determine. So for the Jewish world to say that every person is an entire world, people today have made problems with it, but there's a receptacle to realize, something true, something great in a human being. That's why when you have, let's say, and I'm going to go off a little bit here because the world is so crazy. I just have to really share with you. So you have, let's say, Pita, and like, yes, in the Noahide commandments, there's a commandment not to eat animals before they are properly killed, and then you could eat them because it's cruelty, which means in the Noahide code, in the most basic fundamental reality, you have to be loving to everything, to animals. You cannot be cruel to anything. But when a person has a belief that people and animals are equal, that's a dangerous reality. Okay, we'll explain it more. We'll explain it in a bit. We'll explain how it should be. But I want to start back at the beginning. So we have Adam and Eve are created. There are many, many other creations, other creatures, a tremendous plethora of creations, but they're all multiples. Adam and Eve are created, and they are the beginning of humanity as we know it. As I said before, we're not talking about whether there is a Neanderthal man or not. I'm talking about the first human beings created with a soul. Now, so now you have Adam and Eve, and people misunderstand it. I mean, they think they're frolicking in the garden, and they're like, people who read Genesis do not understand it at all. Genesis is forbidden from teaching it in certain ways because it all is talking about a very much different spiritual reality than the reality of today. And so it's very complicated to speak and teach about, and that's why there are many rules on how you teach the story, teach the inner meanings of what the story of Genesis is. But the common belief that Adam and Eve are like two kids frolicking around and don't know anything, that's completely false. That's not true. That's completely not reality. Adam and Eve were prophets. That was God's handiwork. Okay, we can't fathom. Adam and Eve contained in them all of the souls. You all were contained in the essence of Adam and Eve. Okay, they contained all of humanity of what was going to happen. So how do you go? Okay, so I'm not talking about the sin of Adam and Eve now. That's not my purpose of my topic, but what happens is that how do you go now from that, even though they fell and they did fall and reality did change, we moved in from this supernal type of reality to our present day reality. That did happen. But they were still tremendously righteous people and prophets. How do we come now to where the world starts going off? So I shared this with you once before, and it's frightening because only 3 generations in from Adam. Adam, he has a son named Seth in English, and then by one of Sheth's children, Enosh, by that 3rd generation, there begins the concept of idolatry in the world. So already from early on, the world's going off. So what is idolatry? I want to explain this a little bit. And I want to first in today's session give you some of the reasons why the world went nuts and goes nuts. Idolatry is one of the 7 Noachide laws. Obviously, it is one of the laws a Jew has to give his life for. If he's told to serve an idol or to die, then he gives his life for. And Maimonides explains that the early idolaters were not stupid. He says the early idolaters, the reason why they did idolatry is because they had a messed up idea in their head. What was the idea? They said like this: if the king would come, you would honor the king. If the king sent his officers, you would honor the officers. The sun and the moon and everything in the world is doing the bidding of God. And therefore, there is a place to recognize that. And that's not such a crazy idea. It is in the sense that where it goes off. But the idea of a person being thankful for the things he has, the physical things that he has. You know, the story when Saul was chasing David and David cut the ends of his clothes. And the sages said, no, that wasn't the right thing to do. He was trying to show Saul, I could have killed you, and you think I'm... The whole story there, those who know. But the relating of clothes, you have to say, wow, these are things that God gave me a value. And ladies and gentlemen, it's so crucial because like people who don't realize this don't relate to the world in a proper way. And this is what I said, was hinting at earlier when I said about the idea of pita. You have to understand something. The human being is the pinnacle of creation. When Adam saw all of the creations, he sang this psalm, it's in Psalms. He says, come, let us praise God together. Now, that means a human being is supposed to see the things that are created in the world as vehicles to elevate creation. You have to use the world for a good purpose, not abuse the world. So, yes, this is where people have, like a lot of the bad ideas have a grain of truth to them. There is a grain of truth that you're supposed to take the world to use it, not to abuse it. That's certainly true. But what happens is that Adam saw himself as the pinnacle of creation, and everything God gave him, he was going to elevate. That's why there's a law in the Torah. You're not allowed to chop down a fruit-bearing tree for no reason. It's destruction. You can't destroy. How can you destroy something like that? It's a beautiful thing God gave us in the world. So what happens is now we have a generation that starts with this little crazy idea of, okay, wait a minute. We have to thank the sun, thank the moon, thank the this, thank that. And I don't know what they looked like in the original mistake. Maybe they didn't look so bad. Maybe they kind of looked like, very... I don't mean this in a derogatory way, kind of like hippies. I don't know. Maybe they looked like, people like, oh, we want to tune in and thank everything. And maybe it was something because Maimonides says that the beginning of it was a mistake. But where did it evolve to? It evolved to what's called idolatry. What's idolatry? Idolatry is all of a sudden the sun, the moon, or whatever force is seen as being separated from the source, from God. It has its own power, whatever it is. Whatever it is. We mentioned before, the idea in Christianity of the devil fighting God. That to us is a complete impossibility. God is omnipotent in every way. Anything else has any power, that's called idolatry. How could that be? So the people started maybe with a mistake, but it evolved into a place where they started saying these things had their own separate power. Yeah, there's a supreme God. We don't even disagree with that. But these things have their own separate power. Idolatry. Now, I want to explain this to you. This we talked about once before. This is just fascinating. I've shared this, but it's important to see in the context. I want to build this for the next couple of weeks. So there is now different traits that people have and different traits that we have inside of us that could really mess us up. Okay. There are three traits that if not dealt with properly, they're going to destroy a person. And those are unbridled desire, jealousy, and honor, chasing after honor uncontrollably. And as you can see, all these things may have a place, right? Right? Should I have desire for things that are good for me? For sure. A person who has no desire to do anything, he's apathetic. So what does it mean, unbridled desire? What does it mean that a person has wants honor? Everyone, it's natural. People, I have a friend, Rabbi David Kaplan, and one time he did this thing in a lecture. I thought it was brilliant. He had one of the students walk outside, to go outside, and then I'm going to call you back in to come back in the class in a minute. And he told everybody in the class that when the student comes back in, I want you to start clapping for him. Just start clapping for him. And then stand up and clap for him. The guy went out and he came in and we started clapping. And it was a natural reaction. He couldn't control it. So I started smiling from ear to ear. And when we stood up, he's like, wait, this was a setup. You knew that he must have told us to do this, but you couldn't stop, because there's a place where if I honor you and I recognize you, it's a natural place in a person. A human being needs it. And yet when it's misused, you're in a danger zone. Same thing by desire. If there was no desire, nothing would happen. Everything would stop. There was no desire. Yeah, what the heck? What I care? So eat this, eat that. No, who would go to job? Who would go to work? I don't need anything. I don't want anything. So, but misused, terrible. Jealousy also is a way to have positive jealousy. If you see someone who's doing good things and you want to be like them, that would be very good. So these three things, and I think I shared this with you one time, are lined up with the three possible relationships we have. A person to themselves, a person to other people or things in the world, and a person to God. Right? That's a relationship I have. Can I control myself, or do I eat like like an animal? Because I like the pleasure, I can't stop. It means I have no control over myself. How do I relate to other people? Okay, do I relate to them the proper or improper way? How do I relate to God? These are the three relationships, and these are the three areas that things go awry, because there's a place in a person. This is very key here, because as you guys know, many of you grew up in Christian societies. They've taken Jewish concepts and altered them to the point that they have no connection to what is correct. The original sin idea is some aberration of a Jewish concept and makes a person dirty and bad. We don't say that. However, we do say a person has in them a side to them that wants to do the elevated things, and has a side in them that is supposed to challenge them. Supposed to challenge them, literally. So, for example, if I'm a person who is, I'll give you an example. One of my children, thank God, is a very big Torah scholar. And when he was a kid, he loved candy. Loved candy. So what did I do? I gave him candy. He'd go learn Torah, candy. So, all right. Now, if he would stay in that, and at 30 years old, he's like, hey, can I have a Kit Kat? Then we got a problem on our hands. But if he transfers that desire and that wanting something sweet to something that is now spiritual, he's taking the same trait that could knock him off, and now it's making him great. That's the negativity we have, what we call the Yetzer Hara. The ability to go and to give us a pushback is our need to overcome that. That's what it is. That's why we have it. Not because you're intrinsically bad. That's wrong. It's because the higher part of yourself needs to be brought out by overcoming in your effort the challenges you have. So every person has a place of jealousy. Every person has a place of honor. Every person has a place of desire. How do you deal with those is going to determine if you become a great person or a terrible person. That's really what's going to happen. Now, let me explain today. I want to explain to you about this generation of idolatry. Because idolatry sounds so weird. We don't really understand this. And the reason we don't understand is because the desire for idolatry, it says the sages prayed, it was removed from the world. There is no real desire for idolatry. It doesn't exist. That's why we don't relate to it. Talk about idolatry, you can like, who wants to go to? But in one time in history, when mankind was, chasing after idolatry, there was a powerful desire for it. I'm going to explain to you what it was. Now, I'll ask you a question. Let's say a person has some kind of, superstition, but has some kind of power he thinks he's going to manipulate, some spiritual force he's going to manipulate, and he's going to get what he wants. Now, why would this person do that? Let's say he's not an idiot. Let's say he's some kind of black magic guy. Why would he go and try to manipulate a force to get it instead of communicating with God and getting from the source? Why would he want to do that? It's weird. I mean, we don't believe, obviously it's idolatry for us to believe the power can give him anything that the power can give him anything other than what God wants to give him anyway. That's idolatry. But however, I'm asking a different question. I'm saying, wait a minute, why does he want to do that? You know what the answer is? Because when you talk to God, you can't fool God. You can't manipulate God. The belief of these idolaters were, I'm going to do something. I'll make an incantation. I'll do something. And they weren't just idiots. They were people who had certain spiritual powers and black magic things they knew how to do. But if I manipulate this force in the world and I can get what I want to get, do you know what I've done? I've become God myself. I don't need to come on to ask God, right? Because I could do something and get what I want without God. And you all know the story of the Tower of Babel. That was the idea. Tower of Babel, he built a giant tower and said, God, you stay there and leave us alone. We want to manipulate our world to get what we want. So what happens is the person has a problem with honor. Instead of honoring God and realizing I am an extension and everything I have is because what God gave to me, instead of taking that approach versus I want to be God myself, which is what the snake said to Adam. The serpent said to Adam, he says, you eat the tree, you'll be decent, kill a king, you'll be like God. So that is a power in the person. Everybody wants honor. It's natural. I told you, my friend, when we clapped for that guy, he was smiling ear to ear. Everyone needs to be recognized. But there's a place where that honor, when I don't connect it to where it really belongs, like I kind of don't, like haughty, I mentioned it a few weeks ago. Haughtiness is a funny thing. I don't understand people that are haughty who are beautiful or smart. That one I don't get at all. Like, I don't get it. Like, you didn't make yourself beautiful. You didn't do anything. You were born that way. That should be just a big thank you. Like, why would you think you're above everybody? It's weird, but that's the way people are. But, haughtiness is the place where it's like you're not realizing that what you have is coming from the source. You want to be that power. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to share this with you. You have to understand this. This is a place in all of us like that. That's the negativity that you have to get rid of. And we can. But that's a real negativity where a person in a certain place wants to take credit for themselves to the exclusion of their source that gave it to them. And that really is the root of idolatry. So the world from Adam starts going off the rails pretty early. It's like, like a lot of people want to be self-employed. And I understand that. I definitely do, and I understand that. And it's a real power. It's a real emotion in a person. And in a certain way, it's a good emotion that I want to build, I want to do, I want to be me. But it has a very, very dangerous part that leads the world in a crazy direction. So what happened was 3 generations in, there's already idolatry. And people are going to their own power. Now we have the generation of the flood. And here is illicit relations. Just the pleasure that they were having, they couldn't control it anymore. And that's all they wanted. And you could see that. You could see how a person, it's funny because in America, we're like, I don't know. I don't know what the situation is now. Like I kind of remembered when I was a kid, I used to live in Manhattan. I went to school in Manhattan. And I remember not having air conditioning. I remember just being really hot in the city. I said to my wife this week, I said, does that happen in America? I was like, everyone have like central air conditioning. I get the impression that everyone has it, but like that's kind of somewhat recent. 30 years ago, that wasn't even. So, but everyone expects and everyone wants these comforts. Comforts, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, it's really, comforts are a danger. See, the opposite of pain is not comfort. As a pain is made pleasure. A comfort is kind of like, could be a very slow death. It could just be a place where a person is just like, and that's why sometimes the comforts that we have in today's society, sometimes they numb us to really getting to things that are valuable because we're comfortable. But a person who gets, and it's a natural part, from the time you're a baby, first thing is, and this is the problem. The problem is that we don't get our sense of self and understanding until we hit some age of adulthood. 12 for girls, 13 for boys, until maturity, a certain level. And then it still develops from there. But as a child, today, Rod's smiling because today it's like a 50 again, right? So what happens is that when as soon as you're born, you need to nurse, and you don't care that your mother has not slept, and she's been up all night. You could not care less because you need that, and that is a certain physical pleasure a person needs. So you grow up with that. And that's where I was telling you before, the ability for the higher part of ourselves to come in is so crucial, because you've had years of just being a kid and candy, whatever it is that you want, because that your physical body is dictating what's happening until you have the ability to hook to a higher part of yourselves. So the generation of the flood, it says they had all the good things they wanted. And they got into their pleasure. They couldn't get out of it. Okay, that's what it was. It was just like kept feeding the pleasure. Pleasure is a very fascinating thing. I always tell people, if you notice, there's a very fundamental difference between physical pleasures and spiritual pleasures. Physical pleasures all work the same way. What happens? You're hungry, you eat. You're full, You just add a giant meal. The guy says, here, have another steak on the house. Can't do it because you don't want it, because it's all the same illusion in a certain way. You're empty, full, empty. And once you're full, you don't want it. Spiritual pleasures are not like that. There is no limit to that. The person says, I love someone. You can't say, well, I love them enough. I don't have to love them anymore. You could love them more. It's not based on that system. But the addiction of the pleasure, that really is a place where already very soon on in the world went crazy in its pleasure, and that was generation of the flood, and that fell out there. And then the last one, and I'm not going to go through which generation, it's a little complicated, but I want to get the idea. The third idea is the idea of jealousy, which really we even see from Cain and Abel from the very beginning. A very, very fundamental thing. The jealousy is a breakdown between man and his fellow man. So what happens? Jealousy is a crazy thing. Jealousy doesn't mean that I see someone have something and I want to attain that also. It means it bothers me that they have it. You know, I see Ronald's motorcycle, I'm like, wow. If I say, I want a motorcycle like that, that's not jealousy. But if I would say, I'm not Ronald, I'm not begrudging you the motorcycle. If I said, why does he have a motorcycle? I don't know. That's jealousy. That's a crazy thing. That means already I cannot relate to people. There's no room for me and them in the same world because I need to be the center. I don't see a unity of people. That's Cain and Abel. It's also one of the generations later. So the very beginning of time, the world was already messed up from early on. And this is what I shared one time. And next week, we're going to talk about Christianity. We'll talk about Islam and the evolution of the world further. But from the beginning of time, from Adam's beginning of time, where the world should have been the right path, the negative impulses that people had to control, their unbridled desire, their jealousy, or their wanting of honor from themselves and not for the source, all of that made the world go bonkers. And people were barbarians. And this is very hard to imagine because, and I'm going to get to this, not today, God, I'm going to get this hopefully in the next week or two. The world today is in one way much more civilized, but there's parts of the world that are even more nutty than they were then. The thinking has gone totally kablooey. It's crazy. But the world, in the early stages of the world, people became barbarians. As you see in the Torah, they were sacrificing their own children. It was nutty stuff. You go look at the Incas, ruins. You'll see what was happening. They killed human sacrifice, and that's where Abraham comes in. And as I said to you many times, in the early years, Adam had students. He had his righteous son, Chase, and Chase had his righteous, and there was a group of cadre of people who were righteous, who kept within the system. But the world in itself was going crazy and became barbaric. And that's where Abraham came in. And that's really why Abraham is now the revolution. Because he looked at the world, he didn't grow up like the other people. He didn't grow up, the righteous people were all in one little clique. Abraham's father was an idol merchant. He was the advisor for the king. He was the top idol maker. He subscribed to this whole worldview of power, control, and we'll control it ourselves. And Abraham looked in the world and said, this is not it. And he said, there's a God, there's a source. Once he hit that, everything opened up. There's a source. And God is creating us for a purpose of good. And that's how he made his revolution. He said, come into my house. He opened his tent on all four sides. Come into the house, and I want to give you. People said, you're going to give us? Why are you going to give us? People want to steal from us, right? Because the world was full of theft. No, God gave me, and I'm emulating God. I'm going to give to you. And people were flipped out. They said, wow, thank you. And they said, don't thank me. like the source who gave it to all of us. So this revolution came into the world where all of a sudden it was the opposite of before. It's not about my honor and this guy's idolatry. There's one source who's giving, and he's giving everything. His kindness. I don't have to be jealous of this guy, and I don't have to grab everything for myself. I can give to other people. And since God is giving in this way of goodness, so the world's not about grabbing your own pleasure. It's about something much higher. These were the elements of the world when the world became a barbaric place. And Abraham came into the world to start bringing the cure. That was the cure. And he fought the whole world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before I open it to questions, that's going to be our job. We got to figure out here the continuing the legacy, which we're going to see the legacy of Abraham. And next time I'm going to get into the other mistakes that came out in the children from the point of Abraham. But the first half of the world is the first 2,000 years. Abraham is born in the year 1948 to the creation of Adam. So it's the first 2,000 years of the world, of civilization as we know it. From the time of Adam, it was people became barbarians, worshiping all over the place. Comes along this guy Abraham, and he has a whole different view of the world. And he starts a revolution. And that's why all the stories, they try to kill him because he really is preaching something that the leaders and the kings and the power people don't want. They don't want a world that they're not in control, like God's in control. They don't want a world of goodness where God is giving to everybody. And they don't want a world where there's a higher purpose and not just grabbing my stake. That was the revolution. That was Abram coming into the world. It was set up that way. His soul had to come into the world at that time to give birth to the Jewish people, to give the revelation of the Torah, to bring the world out of the doldrums and the negativity. And as I said to you before, it's definitely the most successful revolution ever. And next time we're going to see the new ways that it went haywire in times from Abraham, and we're going to get up to the times of today. That's my thought for the day. It's a lot of information. I'm going to open it up to questions and ideas.
Rabbi, can I add to your Devar before we move on to questions? Because it brought to mind that this paradox that says the world is getting better, but it's also really bad. And I actually, while you were talking, looked up some statistics. It said that 4 to 6% of Americans, British, and Australians and New Zealanders believe that the world is getting better. 4 to 6%, right? In their mind, most people think it's just getting worse. Right. But statistically, poverty has decreased, right? By leaps and bounds. It says that extreme poverty in the world has, 200 years ago, 90% of the population lived in poverty. By 2018, only 10% of the world population. However, there are still people living on less than $1.60 a day. So don't get me wrong, there is poverty. But overall, the number of child deaths decreased because we have better medicine. People are becoming better educated. Believe it or not, violence has decreased. Now, why do we get the perception it's increased? Because we know of every violent incident that takes place in the world at any time, right? And that's why we know these things. What about climate change? They talk about, the world's going to end, but you realize the proposition of climate change is showing that the world might change by 3 degrees in the next 10,000 years, all right? So climate change isn't really the issue. But the point is this, can we still make improvements? I think because of Abraham and Torah, the world began a pivot. And we had to go through a whole maturation as a society, going through the dark ages, pogroms, persecution, war crimes, et cetera, et cetera. We still have those things, but not at the level we have back then. And those are facts. So the question is, are we getting better or are we getting worse? I would submit that because of the proliferation of Torah and information in the world, we're actually going to become a better society. And it highlights and exposes the negative in the world. That's why it appears that we're such a horrible place right now. Because when you see in contrast goodness, charity, and loving kindness in the world, and we're not talking about Jewish and Noahide, we're just talking about good general people. And you compare that to something horrible like the school shooting, you think the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and really it's not. So the question really would be begged, and I think that next week's lecture should be on what can we do to change it and make it even better. I don't think that we should sit back on our laurels and go, well, we're doing fine, because that's not the attitude.
So I hear you're saying some good points. I want to flesh out a little bit some of the things you're saying. The idea of people that were literally barbarians. I mean, I study in the Torah, the oral Torah, also in the Talmud. I'm studying things that are thousands of years old. They're describing what's happening, like there. I mean, I can't even tell you this. I mean, because some of it sounds like so crazy. So people were really barbarians. So the world became civilized. So I think that is true. The world became civilized. But what happens is, like, if you look at the Nazis, so the Nazis were very cultured people. Before they started killing the Jews, they outlawed the Jewish way to kill animals, which has actually been proven to be the least painful for the animals. Who has a whole slideshow to show you literally how it's the least painful system. And they outlawed it because it was cruel to the animals. And then a couple of years later, they're killing millions of people. So what happens is that civility obviously is much better, but there are the negativity very often takes the form of false beliefs,
right,
that are espoused to be righteousness. And that's the danger. That's really the danger that I think that a lot of people are experiencing right now, which is that they don't know who to believe.
But it's a philosophy.
Saying this, saying that. You have information that can come out, and I could, like when I look at anything, like I have a very critical eye with this. I know where they're coming from. So I'm looking at this. I'm saying, wait a minute. That's a brainwashing. That's a brainwash. So if I talk to you about something and I say it's all about love and this and that, and therefore, so the skewed mentality can be the difference between a culturally refined people who are thinking how not to hurt the animals, and the Nazis who are claiming that's what's going on, and they're really butchers. So the answer is civility. The world certainly has become civilized. That's point one. Point two is that the world already from a long time ago has been set up. The world will not be destroyed. It will be brought to its purpose. So you worry about climate change. And look, I mean, I think before even climate change, like, stop spraying all the things you're spraying. There's so many things that, yes, the pollutions that have been going on are outrageous, but the world is not going to blow up. I mean, the likelihood of Iran bringing the world to a state of nuclear war and the redemption coming out through that is is a much more likely scenario than the ice caps melting and therefore the world falling apart. But again, and this is part of the thing I'm saying to you, Rob, this is why I'm going to get to this. You have to understand something. If I know there's a creator of the world, I know there's a plan. And although I don't know the details of everything, the general plan God has told us in the Torah, I know where we're going. If I'm a guy who doesn't know that, and I'm hearing the world's blowing up, and I don't believe in a creator. I don't believe in a plan. I believe that
You're right.
he got lucky with this cosmic accident. Then Bill Gates has got to put all of his money into.
That's right.
The sun is going to destroy the earth because, from his perspective, there is no purpose. There is no plan, and so the messed up ideas that are in the system right now are creating many problems. So it's a
I agree with you 100%, and I wanted to add that to say the problem is even though society as a whole has become more civil, right? We still have a very large group in society who doesn't regard anything about God and His Torah. So they have a philosophy that drives their emotions, but is not driven by Torah logic. So they come up with their own rules, and often their own rules is to elevate creation above the Creator. So that's why.
Communism, people don't realize when communism was inextricably connected to the idea of atheism. People don't realize that. And therefore, since the world's not fair, because there is no God, we're going to make the system.
Right.
And therefore your government is your parent, and they are your God, and whatever it is. So all of these things are, and that's what I'm going to get to next week. I'm going to go to Christianity, I'm going to go to a little bit of Islam. We'll get to modern times. These are all, messed up ideas. I gave you today the root of it. The root of it, what's called the Yetzer Hara, what's called our internal natural drives, is people that have to be harnessed in the right way, misuse the world goes bonkers. That's what happened. Now we're dealing with a much different situation. People who are believing that they're doing the people who do the most damage obviously believe that they are the greatest people. The Nazis thought they were doing the greatest kindness in the world, and every guy who's giving out the worst ideas is probably under the belief that they are the saviors of society. So you understand what are the ideas, and what you said now, for example, this is a big problem. Now, I don't want to harp on this, but if you don't believe in God, you have a fundamental problem. And I'm going to share this with you a second. This is just, I've done this with students. It makes everyone uncomfortable. But you see, the reality is, if you don't believe in God, you really can't believe in objective morality.
Thank you. Right.
You don't believe in God. So Nazis said, we're doing what we think is good. You think that? So what do people answer me? They answer this most foolish answer: social contract. Why should you be nice? It's a social contract. Because if you're not nice to me, and I'm not nice to you, well, no one's going to gain. That only works on people who want to sign up for that contract. The lion does not want to sign up with the lamb on the social contract.
No, right.
They're stronger and they're happy to eat the lamb. So Nazis and their philosophy of Nietzsche, the Ubermensch, the Superman, was not signing up for that because they didn't want it. And if you don't believe in God, this is the craziest thing. You can't tell them they're wrong because there is no moral, there's no outside the system. It can't be an objective morality. So when someone says to me they don't believe in God, but they're a nice person, I have a question. Why? Why are you a nice person? Because can people make you feel good if you're a nice person?
Misdirected trust, right?
Directed trust.
Well, Rabbi, that's the argument.
Society makes you feel bad if you're not. But if once you hit that Nietzsche philosophy and now you decided you've been given the reins, you could do what you want because you're superior, that guy is going to be a murderer. Why wouldn't he? There's nothing objectively tying him down. So when a guy tells me he doesn't believe in God, but he's a nice guy, I immediately say, okay, but why? Is it because you have a weak constitution and you can't really stand up and do what you want to do? Because if you don't believe in God and you believe the main thing is to get what you want, that's what you really want. Because why? If you don't believe in God, you're not going anyplace. Why do you want to feel His pleasure? You want to feel your pleasure. So why don't you go and grab what you can? Because you're afraid you're gonna get caught. You're afraid people are gonna make fun of you. They're gonna put you down. But how could it be from a higher moral perspective of saying this is objectively wrong when there can't be any objective?
Right.
So yeah.
Let's open the floor real quick because
questions here.
We're almost. I'm sorry. I just this is such a really intriguing discussion.
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
there's
I
a
wanted
lot
to
of
weigh in
information.
myself, but yeah, we
Go,
could
Dan.
just see
Go, Dan.
Well, you know, I see how the whole issue is linked to trust, and I was reading an article last night by the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, and he made the comment that trust is to society what predictability is to nature, and how deep a phrase that was to me. I mean, this is what human nature looks for. It looks for that degree of predictability. Maybe like Rabbi was kind of hinting that people want to take control, you know, for their own selfish desires or whatnot. But there is an integral link between trust and society as a necessity, and the whole concept of morality is this was an article on keeping your word and doing as you say, and how it's the bedrock of true civilization. But what I see in my studies archaeologically of any ancient religious sites, like even the Ur of Chaldees, a lot of these centers were places where people came for food, and society was centered around that because people's needs were met. And you had misdirected trust, and Abraham, you know, redirected it, if you will. But there's glue there in understanding how trust is to society as predictability is to nature, and this is where the atheists, you know, put their trust in the predictability. Right? They look at the clockwork mechanism and see predictability. And they have a trust in certain matters, whereas you know, that's not moral, as you've stated. And I did have only one question on YouTube, but your wife answered it on YouTube directly, so I'm thankful for that. So
I think Tar had his hand up before, or did I see a hand up before on the screen?
Yeah, Tar, where are you at? Are you going?
Sorry, he stepped out, so I don't think he has his hand up. I'm sorry.
You have the question.
Okay.
We'll take it from you too.
Tar, you have a question?
I have several comments and one question. I understand. I agree with both of you, Rabbi and Rod, about what you're saying about society is so much better today in many ways. The one thing I can see that has never been part of society is the question of gender identity. And it's just being fueled by politicians now. It's become such a controversy on what is a man, what is a woman. I can be whatever I want to be, you know. And I've never, from what I know of society, from history, it has never been this way. Now, is it a fad? It very well, we could all hope it could be. But I mean, it's in our society now so much, I don't see where it ever goes away.
So Tar, I want to answer you because that's one of the sessions I'm going to.
Okay.
Because
Well,
when I talk about our society, I believe that this is the most problematic thing that we've ever seen. This is actually, and I will get to it. I don't want to already spill the beans that I'm going to talk about, but this is in a certain way even worse than the early things, because the early things when a person has unbridled desire and this and that, those are negative qualities that are natural to the person that they need to deal with. We're talking about a whole different thing today. And that's
Yeah.
why I was very slow. I was not saying better or worse. I would not, that's why I didn't go for that, because more civilized, yeah. But the crazinesses that are being put into reality, I gave the example of earlier of Darwinism, and I gave that as an example because we all grew up with that. You know, this trans stuff is brand new. I mean, it's like now all of a sudden, like no one knows what they are. You know, if you would have asked President Biden 10 years ago how many genders there were, there'd be no question he would say 2.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, if you say that, you're like you're a racist. The craziest things. People think things they didn't believe 5 years ago. If you don't believe them today, then you're a racist. You're this, you're that. So this is a new sickness that we have to deal with. I only started early on, and I mentioned the thing about about Darwinism because I wanted you to understand, because we've all grown up in a world where the idea of things being random was already in the world by the time we were all born here. But these are the challenges of the world where they're going through every different misunderstanding of reality and thereby messing things up. Now, again, I have good news for everybody. This is good news, especially if you're here on this channel because you're going on the right side of history. The good news is that we are moving towards a world of tikkun, of fixing up.
Yeah.
The world is moving to a time where it will be clear. Everyone will know, as the verse says, that the world will be filled with knowledge of God, kemayim liyam mechasim, like the way the waters fill the sea. That is happening. It is not far off. But it's a rocky road till we get there. And there's a lot of things happening now that are, to me, because there is a statement I shared with you once that says that when the Mashiach comes, the question, it could be one opinion, it's a generation that's totally messed up. And I'm going to explain, I will get to it. I will explain how the concept of not knowing what you are, how that is maybe the greatest destruction of the human psyche. This is a very, very serious problem. It's a very, very serious problem because there is a sense, I'll just give you a hint at this, I'll talk about it more later, but you know, the great philosopher Descartes wanted to understand, how do I know I exist? Maybe I'm imagining it. Well, and the best he came up with, I think, therefore I am. Okay, you know, so after thousands of pages, whatever, he came up with it. Now, Tar, do you exist?
The last time I checked, yeah, I do believe I do.
That's right. So I'm not telling you not to read Descartes, but what I am telling you is there is something, it's called the dot of a person. There is certain things you know because you know them. And if you don't, you got a problem on your hands. You got a problem on your hands. So I'm happy to do the philosophy of Descartes. I can do it, you know, well, fine. But if reality is you don't know if you exist, you have a deep problem. Because the place where, you know, there's certain things that you know because you know them. And that's why people not knowing what they are, we're going to talk about it, is a new phenomenon in the world that is another example. And to me, I agree with you, Tar, it's the ultimate example. And I'm going to explain to you even why this is such a big deal. I mean, it's funny because when President Obama was the president and this discussion came up, everyone said, why is everyone discussing it? How many people are trans in the world today? Like what? And now all of a sudden from this, you know, every kid in California now thinks that they're the opposite gender, which is obvious that there's brainwashing going on because all of a sudden they have these things that they didn't have 5 years ago. But why were they talking about it 5-10 years ago when there were a few people in the world? I'm going to explain to you why that is too, because there is unfortunately an agenda here.
Well, another thing that can, you know, concern me or whatever is artificial intelligence. They claim that they have robots out there that you can't tell is from human beings, and I believe that could be true. I believe they have artificial intelligence so precise that if it's not there, it will be. And the trouble is that those smart, intelligent, whatever they are going to be able to reproduce themselves, there. So here we have, man has created a being that's able to think and do for itself. And to me, that's another Tower of Babel. That's another reason for the flood. That just, man has reached a position that God just cannot tolerate. And I don't know if that's true or not. So,
okay, that's a good question. I'd like to answer that question. Very good question. I don't know exactly what's happening with artificial intelligence. I don't know exactly where it's up to and what they can do and what they will be able to do. I know one thing for sure. They will never create a person. And the problem is, and this is, Tara, doesn't mean the thing's not a problem, because it could be very well, like all good things, most things in the world can be used for good or bad. I always say about the phone. I mean, like, in Israel, most of my rabbinic counterparts, they will not have a smartphone, because the dangers for a kid to have this item is very, very great. I have access to every Torah book. I mean, I have thousands. I have a very big library, but thank God, this is one, but I have like 4 rooms of books. I can get every book that I can't get on my phone in 2 seconds. So I can use it for good or for bad. So what they use the artificial intelligence for, they could possibly use it for bad things. I don't know, but I know one thing, and this is the answer to what your question. They cannot create a human being, because the human being's root is their soul. A human being is not a computer, and this is a very hard thing for the world to understand, especially the people. And this was a big argument in the early 1900s, when there was a materialistic world. There was a belief that people don't have free will, because if I know everything about your past, I can predict everything you're going to do. That was the belief. I thought they were called the monists. I thought they were called. They believed that, because that was the world of the steam engine. That was the world of the physics before Einstein and before quantum physics, relativity, quantum physics, which changed the equation. They said, "Wait a minute, I don't understand. If like this, if your mother yelled at you, 'Don't steal,' and you feel a certain level of guilt, okay, so you won't steal. But if the thing is worth more to you than the guilt, and you won't get caught, then you will steal. And we can tell you everything a person is going to do, because we have all that. If we had the facts, we can predict that. That is a materialistic view of the world, which is untrue, because a human being has a soul, and therefore is not limited to those decisions. They have something that's above the system. And so whatever the artificial intelligence does create, and it can be used for bad, it will never be a person. And therefore, it will never be, for the people who know are never going to use it more than a computer who can calculate things. But the people in the know are not going to rely on it for moral decisions. The fools might, but the smart people are going to go to the sages and not to the computers. Okay, we have any more questions? I think we're actually over time. If you got one more.
Yeah, we're over time now. Let's ask, is anybody else, because we've just basically ran out of time, but it was a great class, Rabbi. Look forward to next week, by the way.
Okay, next week we're going to get into more modern craziness and what we need to do about it. We don't need to complain about it. We need to understand our role in it and understand it in the grander picture, and the good news that God is bringing the world to its perfection by hook or crook.
Baruch Hashem. And until let's see. The next class is going to be Wednesday night. Parsha study with Steve and Bjorn, and then myself on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. And also Rabbi Zvi Avner joins us as well. And so until then, everyone say shalom, shalom, and leitrod.
All right, so we are on for next week, same time, same channel. I'm telling people when they say they have questions, I say write them down, and please do come back. We're going to be back same time next week. We hope to see you, and thank you so much, Rabbi Ingber. Beautiful, beautiful message today.
Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely one for the record books, right? For sure. All right, so I'm going to sign out. I got to get to bed to go back and work nights. So have a wonderful, wonderful day.